Good afternoon to all, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Breaking Down the SLED Opportunity, brought to you by the Clover Imaging Group. My name is Tim Cahill. I'm the Director of Sales with Clover, and I will be your host today. Before I introduce our presenters, I would like to review a few quick housekeeping notes. All of our attendees are in listen-only mode, so if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A section of your Zoom platform. Once a question is answered, the question and the respective answer will become visible to all of our audience members. If we are unable to answer your question live, we will follow up individually after this meeting via email. Also, this webinar is being recorded, so if you have a hard stop or if anyone in your organization is unable to attend today, we will provide the full presentation recording via your dashboard of the cloverimaging.com website. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. We have our Senior Vice President of Global and Public Sector Sales for Clover, Steve Noyes, and our Vice President of Federal Sales for Clover, Steve Reid. Thank you for taking the time to be with us here today, and I will turn things over to Steve Reid to get us started.
All right, thanks, Tim, and thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. I wanted to kind of kick things off here with a couple of comments on how we plan to use Clover's success in the federal space as kind of a launching pad into success for state, local, and education opportunities. You know, Clover has really taken some major strides in the last several years to get a significant foothold in the federal marketplace. And we've partnered directly with GSA to literally help shape policy as it relates to non-OEM imaging supplies and how the government officially defines our category for its buyers. And almost 7 years after the first meeting at GSA's Region 2 headquarters in Manhattan, Clover remains the only remanufacturer to serve on GSA's Imaging Industry Council. We're the only remanufacturer officially recognized by GSA as having an authorized federal dealer program. And in 2021, we were the test pilot manufacturer selected by GSA to help launch the new verified product portal. So as we continue to build out that vertical and what we expect to be our best year yet in the federal space, we're ready to expand that into the parallel universe of state, local, and education, also known as SLED opportunities, of course. So Tim, if you want to go to the next slide, please. We're going to talk a little bit here about why SLED and why now. So obviously the sheer volume of the opportunity is really at the heart of all this. You know, SLED's overall toner usage nationwide is realistically estimated to be in the billions of dollars. And for these tax-supported entities and agencies and school districts and so on, that usage, those billions of dollars, can be found in the public domain, the details of that usage. So you should be able to see who is on a contract today, when it expires, when it's up for renewal, what it takes to get a manufacturer added to the contract, what the spend is on office supplies and so on. And then if you're armed with that knowledge, it's going to make it easier for you to hunt if you know where the big game is in your own backyard. And as a subcategory of office products, imaging supplies is usually in the range of about 20% of a state agency's office supply spend. And that makes it what we would call a category of consequence. Meaning it's so large. And the result of converting a category of consequence from the OEM toner will really move the needle to help satisfy buyers' purchasing objectives for set-aside spending, for example, like small business or veteran-owned, woman-owned, minority-owned, hub-zone, and so on, all those different types of set-aside entities, or for purchasing objectives for things like sustainability. So as we go on to the next slide here, let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Noyes here, if you can advance to the next slide. We want to talk, Steve, next here about how that publicly available information and how our partners can use that information to not only get ahead of bids before they come out, but also to prepare a response to an RFQ that's on the street.
Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending where you're listening. I want to welcome old friends and new friends, and thank you for joining us today. Compared to the contract commercial market, because this is a tax-supported bid, business to government information can reside in the public domain. So some of the questions that you can ask include, we want to investigate beyond the primary name listed on a bid. Usually they identify the contract administrator, but we encourage you to identify everyone involved in the decision-making universe. This can include the climate change or the sustainability champion, the diversity, equity, inclusion champion, and the senior executives. We need to define the parameters or the timeline of the current contract. We need to clarify and prioritize their decision-making and purchasing criteria. What are their hot buttons? And if you know everyone in the room and can read the room, it can help you discover if they're focused on priorities such as best value and savings. Do they have inflation or budget concerns? Do they have environmental sustainability objectives? And how are they addressing and measuring those objectives? We can provide the savings environmental calculators that are so helpful. And do they have in-state or residence priorities or concern over various socioeconomic statuses of their dealers? For example, women-owned or service-disabled veteran, disability inclusion. And we want to solicit their annual usage and best case scenario, their future forecast by SKU. We want to define the population and the age of the printer fleet by OEM make and model number. And then based on usage, ask, do they have the right printers to satisfy the printing demands of that user, that person, or that department? And then partner with your friends at Clover and give your historical usage to your Clover account manager, and we will cross-reference that and quote by SKU from either the incumbent OEM or the compatible or the competing remanufacturer. And depending on your relationship with that consumer, your own dealer fulfillment model, and the terms of that bid, this can also include products sourced from our mutual partner wholesalers. We can help to cross-reference Innovera from Ascendant, Elite Image from SP Richards, CIG brand from SuppliesNet and TD Synex, and B7 from Ingram Micro. Clover can't quote these brands from the wholesaler, but we can help with the cross-reference and the specification. So it's important to ask them also, how are you buying or how do you intend to buy? For example, is this a cost per page managed solution? Is it an auto fulfillment solution? Or is it transactional or cost per cartridge? And then we can educate the customer on why Clover. We just introduced our new partner marketing portal, and I encourage you to visit our website, log into your account, and see the robust library of marketing collateral that can be customized. So next slide.
You know, Steve, before we go to the next slide, we do have a couple of questions that have come in through our Q&A. I'm going to take the first one, which is this meeting being recorded, and will we be able to provide the content after the fact? Both the recording and the supplementary follow-up materials from this webinar will be available on your cloverimaging.com dashboard. And if you're unable to find it, or if you're running into any issues, please just contact your account manager and they'll be able to provide the requested information for you. An additional question I won't be able to answer, so I'm going to pass it over to you, Steve, is what is the best way to respond to a bid that requires me to recover the exhausted empty cartridges?
So we host a simple process. First, register on cloverenvironmental.com, www.cloverenvironmental.com. Second, bolt on or load the www.therecyclingsite.com or some customized face of the recyclingsite.com onto your company's website. And the instructions are on the website, and they invite consumers to collect their empty inkjet and laser cartridges. We cannot accept toner tubes or bottles or the Chinese single-use plastic clone compatibles. And then from the site, consumers can download a shipping label and Clover pays the freight. And the items get returned to our processing center, and the participants can monitor and celebrate the recovery results through the 3 levels of tracking.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. And then another question, I believe, is related to the first bullet point on this slide right here. That is, where is the best place to get the up-to-date contact information required for these SLED entities?
Well, because SLED entities are funded by taxpayer dollars, many of these contracts can reside in the public domain. They can be posted on websites of their state, city, county, municipality, K through 12, college, or university. And we would just encourage you to start by researching the title on the host's website. Type questions into search engines like Google, research social media like LinkedIn and Facebook, and search by variations or synonyms of the job title or the job function. For example, purchasing manager, director of procurement, buyer, acquisition officer, etc. And if you reach a contact by phone or email and it's incorrect, ask that person for guidance. Ask him or her, who is the buyer or administrator for the city contact? So we can go on to the next slide.
Sure thing.
Sorry, I had myself on mute, everybody. So we're going to talk here about becoming a trusted partner and what does that mean to become a trusted partner? Let's talk a little bit about that. So you really want to position yourself as a consultant to the buyer and not just someone who's offering the lowest price, technically acceptable product. You want to focus on and quantify the message, obviously, of annualized savings and environmental sustainability, but be prepared to dig deeper and ask questions that are going to save them even more than just a straight OEM conversion of the current SKUs that they're asking for. For example, does the RFQ capture supplies for home office printers? What about inkjet and smaller brother and HP laser devices? You want to recommend that they replace every HPA to an X model. And this is going to let them know that you have their interest in mind in providing the best possible cost per print. Recommend Clover sourced new OEM and certified refurbished printers where applicable. And then don't forget about parts. What about parts? Submit a quote for CRUs, customer replaceable units like maintenance kits and fuser assemblies for their fleet. And then even if the RFQ specifies OEM, we recommend, and many of our dealers already do this, but we recommend this strongly, and that is to go ahead and submit the Clover option to challenge the OEM only language. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides. But speaking of challenging an RFQ, Tim, let's go to the next slide unless there's any more questions.
There actually are two that popped in. First of which is a lot of IT departments demand OEM only. You mentioned supplies, parts, printers. How can our dealer partners overcome that initial objection, for lack of a better term, that OEM is required?
Sure, I can take that one. We've had success with these 4 best practices. The first step is to create distance from any previous experiences that they've had. Clover is very proud to be celebrating our 25th anniversary. And during that time, the remanufacturing and print industries have evolved since really the mid-1980s. It's consolidated from, some would say, over 8,000 remanufacturers, each with their own production standards and performance criteria, to less than 100. Humbly stated, Clover provides the best-selling bill of materials, or the BOM, in the history of the industry, as measured by volume and the number of brands. Across the world, nobody sells more remanufactured finished goods than Clover. The second piece is, depending on the interest, the degree of interest of the person, we can explain in great detail some of the processes and advantages. That can start just with the 2-year warranty, the quality and environmental certifications, the independent third-party analysis conducted by Buyers Lab, and invite them to take a virtual video tour of the facilities. The third is to gain credibility from some of the long-term support we have from our strategic partners, our wholesalers, our buying groups, industry associations, OEMs, Walmart and Target, and that the U.S. federal government selected Clover to support their Ability One Skillcraft brand. This presentation has a companion resource and it expands on that Clover experience specification, and that provides the best practices, and it also shows the GSA enforcement guidelines, which explains what to avoid. We also, the fourth thing is plug in or show the context of their purchasing objectives and show them how Clover remanufactured imaging supplies can specifically satisfy those purchasing objectives. It's a hand-in-glove solution compared to the OEM. We can go on to the next slide.
Thank you, Steve. We actually have one more question that I'd like to pass to you because you answered a similar question. This seems to be a little bit of a subset of it. You mentioned where the contacts can be found for the SLED entities, but where in the public domain can purchasing volume and existing contracts within SLED agencies be found?
So I think the best answer for that is you can try search engines. There are also partners, John DePisa from BidDesk Analytics. There is GovWin and Deltec. They have a great database, so you can source information from third parties, or just in your local backyard, you can Google or just research on search engine what is out there, and look at history. What are previous bids, and research that.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve. I'll return to the content while we get a few more questions.
All right, so Steve, we're going to talk about some of the challenges, Steve, about the or issues that are faced when an RFQ is released under the term of compatible. I think this is something that we've had recent success with in terms of challenging some of these RFQs. So maybe you can kind of talk about that and let everybody know what's going on there.
Absolutely. Let's spend a minute and talk about this term compatible and its inherent deficiency. It's blinker fluid. It's fairy dust. It's a unicorn. The term doesn't apply to a product or a product category. This is important because language underpins selection and it helps set consumer expectations. In the commercial business-to-business environment, some buyers would say you get what you pay for. But in the federal government, in the SLED environment, consumers get what has been specified. The term compatible is not a universally recognized primary search term. It can help describe that a cartridge fits into the supply compartment or the printer. Clone compatibles lack an agreed upon uniform definition, production methods, performance testing, and quality standards. And compatibles lack a recovery solution. Single-use plastic is a challenge to recycle, and nearly all compatibles are from China, and some may have unresolved OEM intellectual property issues. And this can introduce questions of risky liability for the dealer and the consumer. Conversely, support for the term remanufactured is universally codified by industry, associations, academia, GSA, and it has legal case precedent in the adjudication between HP and LD products. So the key point here is Clover has protested and won RFQs that originally called for compatibles, but we protested based on the grounds of ambiguous language. We can move on.
And Steve, before I move on to the next slide, there is one more question I'd like to propose is, do most states give a preference to business entities within their own state, or do they just care about getting the lowest price?
A little bit of both, yes. Several states do exercise a preference for businesses that reside within that tax jurisdiction, states, counties, and cities within that tax jurisdiction. In some cases, dealers outside of that tax jurisdiction may be able to team with a local partner. Clover's is building a database. So our library is under construction. In the short term, as I mentioned before, we can reference John DePisa from BidDesk or GovWin by Deltec. The emails and the phone numbers of those contacts are going to be in our companion document. The second part of your question, in certain cases, low price technically acceptable can be overturned with references to clarity over the country of origin and challenging the language. Again, the product specification, the production standards, the performance measurements, and the sustainability. So can we move on to the next slide?
Thank you. You got it.
All right, so in the time remaining, I want to cover a couple other key strategies that are going to help our partners succeed, starting with how we can exploit in a positive way the fact that our cartridges are remanufactured in North America. And then we want to talk about some of the best practices of a protest and give an example. So Steve, if you want to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. We do want to exploit that country of origin designation. The country of origin can be kryptonite. Compatibles are most successful when they're sold under the cover of shadows. It can be intentional or unintentional misinterpretation or misrepresentation. Our objective is to shine a bright spotlight on this murky option and expose it for what it is. We referenced earlier that case precedent of HP versus LD products in February 4th of 2013, where HP outlined the differences between what a compatible and a remanufactured option is. The terms are not interchangeable. Also, a high probability exists that certain SLED decision makers could find it unsettling to use taxpayer dollars to fund an adversary. Consider the best practice of the federal government. GSA requires compliancy with the Trade Agreement Act as a criterion to be listed on the multiple award schedule. And in the evolving world of the GSA cyber security maturity model, and in the context of this zero trust architecture, we want to avoid dangerous risk. And a path to the computer network can be through the printer. Laser cartridges have a computer chip. Inkjet cartridges have an e-patch. What happens if a computer network is attacked with a malicious virus or crippling malware that was installed on the chip of the imaging supplies? You can be safe with Clover. We test every cartridge before packaging and we guarantee the performance of that cartridge. So the next bullet on here is the best practices or the anatomy of a protest. And of course, the preference is to plan ahead, get involved early, and avoid submitting a formal protest. But if we have to, there are two types or protocols of a protest. A pre-award invitation to alert them that unless they clarify ambiguous language before the date of submission, then your intention is to protest to everyone. The second and less effective strategy is to submit a protest after the award. Ideally, we prefer to introduce the Clover experience specification so that it can be written into the bid before the RFQ is released. The timing of the protest is important because statistically it can be a challenge to reverse an award. The time to act is before the bid is awarded. Pre-award protests have the highest probability of success. An initial request for clarification can have the greatest impact if we communicate or CC everyone in the orbit of the selection process and the budget. So let's explain, let's provide an example of a protest. A case example can be the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, which is a division of the Department of Justice. We successfully challenged that term compatible, that it can be seamlessly interchanged with the term remanufactured on the grounds of ambiguous language. The RFQ was suspended. They issued a request for information, an RFI, and then they reissued a new RFQ. This took several months, and we challenged it before the award, and we copied everybody. We established a relationship, and now we're working with a trusted Eagle One federal dealer partner to fulfill a 5-year blanket purchase agreement. So those are some of the strategies that we can look at. We also wanted to mention is that, during the review or after you win, search for other profitable opportunities from Clover. We've got a broad line of laser, inkjet, extended yield jumbo cartridges, over 1,700 SKUs, including Micker and Micker print solutions. We've got postage machine consumables and wide format ink. We've got parts and kits and OEM and certified refurbished printers. We also still have some personal protective equipment. If we have that, personal protective equipment, the PPE. And of course, leverage the new partner marketing portal that was just launched and the future public sector resource portal. Finally, we invite you to contact your Clover account manager at the end of this to request that 12-page SLED companion guide to this presentation. And finally, what is the summary takeaway from this presentation? We're not asking you to boil the ocean. SLED is not new, but in the context of current events, we have identified some important trends, and we wanted to share the promise of growth, new customer relationships, measurable new business, and encourage your consideration to pursue SLED opportunities. It's worth your time. In some cases, we can win by challenging the status quo, first with grace and respect, but then if we need to be, we can be more forthright and direct. We can put on our John Taffer from Bar Rescue. History has validated that RFQs and bids get recycled. Legacy, dated language can be served up as gospel. Contract administrators are overworked, and most dealers will merely respond to the bid as the bid was written. We encourage you to engage early, become that trusted partner and advisor, assess the bid against their purchasing objectives, lean in with Clover remanufactured imaging supplies. And remember, this is not an all or nothing proposition. It can be a blended solution. This is a category of consequence. It will move the needle and allow you to show significant savings and provide the solution to their sustainability goals. The key is we want to challenge the consumer's automatic acceptance of the OEM and the perception that the term compatible is interchangeable with the term remanufactured. So the call to action is open the aperture of your lens to consider SLED opportunities, investigate and partner with your friends from Clover, bring us those opportunities to cross-reference and quote. This can be disruptive, but it will create opportunity. So in closing, Steve, Reid, and I want to thank you for sharing time with us this last 27 minutes. We don't pretend to know everything. We learn more every day. We are building a library of resources and examples to share with you to help you become more successful. And finally, we want to thank our executive team for their support and our marketing team for helping to develop this presentation, the companion guide, the website, and the microsite. So Tim, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. And I would like to once again thank Steve and Steve for coordinating this time today. And on behalf of myself and Clover, thank you to all of our attendees for spending some time or spending some of their Thursday with us. If there are any questions remaining in the Q&A section, those will be followed up individually by your account manager, and we'll do our best to get those promptly answered for you. And as a reminder, the Clover marketing team will make this recording available for anyone that has joined late, left early, or was unable to attend. Thank you again, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Take care.